episode 6 of the P2P Connects Us podcast. I'm your host, John Light, and on today's episode, we're going to be talking about Uber's communications challenges, Ripple Labs' party in San Francisco, 2 new peer-to-peer services that I think you should know about, and last, but certainly not least, Paige Peterson joins the show to tell us about Project Safe. Hello, and welcome once again to episode 6 of the P2P Connects Us podcast. I have a few announcements to make. First, I'd like to announce that shortly after interviewing Greg Silpak of the OK Turtles Foundation, I decided to join the foundation to help with fundraising and grant writing. Since then, we have integrated the OK Turtles GitHub with a service called Bounty Source, which makes it easy for anyone to post and respond to development bounties on specific GitHub issues. If there are any developers out there who want to help with the development of DNS chain, decentralized DNS software, or OK Turtles, which is secure communications software that uses DNS chain to enable man-in-the-middle proof communications across arbitrary websites, please check out the GitHub page or the Bounty Source profile to see the list of all the bounties that we have available for developers. And for anyone else who's interested in contributing to the development of this software but doesn't have any coding skills, you are more than welcome to help fund bounties, either contribute to existing bounties or post new bounties for any of the issues that we have on the GitHub page. You can go to GitHub and just do a search for OK Turtles, and you'll be able to find all of the issues within any of the OK Turtles repos. Now that I am officially affiliated with OK Turtles, anytime you hear me talk about them, just know that, full disclosure, I do technically work for them now. And of course, I'm happy to support their mission. I think it's really important. Another important announcement, which is probably obvious to listeners of P2P Connects Us, is that after episode 5 with Tatiana Moroz, which, by the way, went on to become the most listened to episode of P2P Connects Us with over 19,000 plays on SoundCloud. Thanks a lot, everyone who listened to that episode and shared it with friends and family. After that episode, I took my first podcast sabbatical, and it certainly won't be the last. I wasn't expecting it to last as long as it did. It lasted about a month. And next time, I will definitely let you know ahead of time. And that said, I am going to be taking another little break just for the holidays, and I will be back in January. But I'm going to be posting this episode and one more before I take a short break for the holidays. Big thanks to everyone who reached out to say hello while I was gone, to see what I was up to. I appreciate your patience waiting for the next episode, and it shall be rewarded handsomely. To make up for the long break, I'm going to be posting some inspirational Agorist radio podcasts from my archive that were thought to be lost after the site which originally hosted them went offline, but luckily I diligently backed up all of the episodes that I downloaded and will be posting some up on the Let's Talk Bitcoin website at letstalkbitcoin.com, and you can listen to those episodes for a familiar voice from the Let's Talk Bitcoin network and hear how the Bitcoin phenomenon began just a few short years ago. I'm also going to be posting the full MP3 of the theme song of P2P Connects Us, Curbside Killers by Scof, a one-man band formed by a friend of mine from high school, Nick Jones. I've had this song on my computer for a long time, and always wanted to use it for something. It's a really nice tune, and I've heard a lot of great compliments from people who also enjoyed the song. So I would like to give you all an opportunity to have the song and share it with anybody else that you think would enjoy it. So I'll be posting the MP3 alongside this episode on P2P Connects Us and letstalkbitcoin.com. During my podcast sabbatical, I did a bit of traveling to Vegas twice. At the beginning of November, I went to the Money 2020 conference in Vegas, where a company that I work with called eSpend was throwing their launch party. eSpend is a Ripple gateway software as a service company. They recently integrated with Cryptsy, and now using eSpend's software, Cryptsy has Ripple's XRP currency trading against all of Cryptsy's 130 plus alternative cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin. So if you are interested in trading XRP or Bitcoin, you can check out the markets that they have available over at Cryptsy.com. In addition to the XRP integration, eSpend is working hard to get Cryptsy integrated as a Ripple gateway, and Cryptsy will offer full gateway functionality soon, meaning that if you are a Cryptsy customer, you will be able to withdraw any of Cryptsy's 130 plus alternative cryptocurrencies to the Ripple network to trade on the decentralized Ripple exchange. Pretty cool feature. Looking forward to seeing that once it's done. A week after Money 2020, I went back to Vegas to attend the Thiel Foundation Summit. Thiel Foundation is a nonprofit that was started by entrepreneur and investor Peter Thiel, who is most notable for co-founding PayPal and being the first outside investor in Facebook. At the summit, I received a copy of his book that he released with Blake Masters called 0 to 1 on startups or how to build the future. I finished reading it since then. It's a pretty good book that I recommend to any entrepreneurs who are looking to start a company with grand ambitions. Notable speakers at the summit included Rose Broom of HandUp, which is a startup that is basically like a social networking website for homeless people combined with crowdfunding. So homeless people are given cards with a link to their profile page, and if people are touched by their story or just want to support the homeless person, they can give money to HandUp, and HandUp will make sure that it is responsibly distributed to the homeless person. Rose told some stories about how they have actually helped homeless people escape homelessness, and I think it's a really great example of technology being used to help people in a somewhat peer-to-peer way. I mean, it's kind of like peer to business to peer, but nonetheless, it's a model that can be used going forward to create truly peer-to-peer services to help the people who need it the most. Another notable speaker was Balaji Srinivasan, who is a general partner at the VC firm Andreessen Horowitz, who gave a marvelous presentation about Bitcoin. He basically said that if any people who were attending the summit who were thinking about starting a company or working on some new technology and didn't know where to start, Bitcoin would be a good place to look. I agree wholeheartedly. Thanks a lot, Balaji, for evangelizing Bitcoin in such an impressionable crowd. Another great speaker who was there was Tony Hsieh from Zappo, who gave a talk about how important corporate culture is to his company and how it's helped them build a great brand. And he also shared some information about what they're working on with the downtown project in downtown Las Vegas, which seeks to build a vibrant entrepreneurial ecosystem and community, which increases the frequency of serendipitous encounters, or accelerating serendipity, I think is the term he used, which I think is a really interesting concept. In fact, that's actually how they measure progress to figure out how well the project is doing, is to try and think of how many serendipitous encounters they can create by creating walkable neighborhoods and optimizing population density and things like that. And of course, probably the most notable speaker at the summit, not to diminish any of the other wonderful speakers, Mr. Peter Thiel himself, who gave a talk about his book 0 to 1 and held an informative question and answer session afterwards. Overall, throughout the weekend, I met a lot of cool people, a lot of young entrepreneurs and scientists working on world-changing technology, and learned more about the Downtown Project when we did our little startup crawl, where we, as a group, basically went around downtown Las Vegas and visited some of the startups that have decided to call downtown Las Vegas their home. It was very interesting. Next time, if you're ever in Las Vegas, I recommend going down there and checking out the Downtown Project. Just one last reminder here, I am going to be going off the air again in December for the holidays, but will be back sometime in January. If you want to get in touch with me between now and then, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter at P2P Connects Us, or you can reach me through the contact page on my website at p2pconnects.us. Uber. Uber has found itself in hot water once again. This time, the company that has gained infamy for launching the equivalent of a denial of service attack against its competitors, for promoting police militarization by sponsoring the Urban Shield Convention, for flaunting surveillance of its customers by showing off an internal system known as God Mode to journalists, and for taking larger and larger cuts of its drivers' take-home pay, has found one of its executives embroiled in controversy after suggesting a $1 million opposition research program to investigate and report on the personal lives of journalists that are critical of Uber. An executive at the company by the name of Emil Michael reportedly made a comment during a conversation with BuzzFeed journalist Ben Smith at a private dinner suggesting such a program, specifically aimed at a journalist for the website Pando Daily named Sarah Lacey, who has been particularly critical of Uber. After BuzzFeed Ben, as he's known on Twitter, broke the story, pundits from all corners of the blogosphere came out to weigh in on the ethics and seriousness of the comments. Uber CEO Travis Kalanick himself sent out a tweet storm commenting on the story, saying, quote, "Emil's comments at the recent dinner party were terrible and do not represent the company. His remarks showed a lack of leadership, a lack of humanity, and a departure from our values and ideals. His duties here at Uber do not involve communication strategy or plans and are not representative in any way of the company approach. Instead, we should lead by inspiring our riders, our drivers, and the public at large. We should tell the stories of progress and appeal to people's hearts and minds. We must be open and vulnerable enough to show people the positive principles that are at the core of Uber's culture. We must tell the stories of progress Uber has brought to cities and show our constituents that we are principled and mean well. The burden is on us to show that, and until Emil's comments, we felt we were making positive steps along those lines. But I will personally commit to our riders, partners, and the public that we are up to the challenge. We are up to the challenge to show that Uber is and will continue to be a positive member of the community. And furthermore, I will do everything in my power towards the goal of earning that trust. I believe that folks who make mistakes can learn from them, myself included. And that also goes for Emil. And last, I want to apologize to @Sarah unquote. @Sarah being Sarah Lacey, that journalist who Emil's comments were aimed at. I myself would be particularly interested in learning about Uber's values and ideals, and positive principles that are at the core of Uber's culture. As mentioned earlier, a lot of people have weighed in on this story, including a woman who attended the dinner that night, and stated that she did not think the comment was well thought out, that it sounded like an offhand comment that Mr. Michaels made simply out of frustration during what he believed to be a private, off-the-record conversation. Regardless of the motivation or context, it's clear that he made a mistake, and Uber now has one more issue to add to its growing pile of issues as it continues to grow and scale at a breakneck pace. Like all problems, though, this presents an opportunity to take responsibility, as their CEO did in his tweet storm, and also an opportunity to work hard to change the systemic cultural conditions that led this to occur in the first place. Why did Emil Michael think that suggesting such a thing was appropriate, even if it was in private? Unfortunately, a company's culture is often defined very early on, and is most crucially defined by its leadership. And since it's not likely that Mr. Kalanick is going anywhere anytime soon, and even Mr. Michael himself is still with the company, I think it will be difficult for Uber to change the beat that they're marching to, and will instead continue business as usual, albeit with perhaps a bit more discipline and diplomacy on the part of their executives and communications teams. While I still think it's great that services like Uber exist, and are already forcing changes in the legacy industries that they're disrupting. For instance, the price of taxi medallions is down 17% in New York City and Chicago, and 20% in Boston. I do have concerns which have held me back from using these kinds of services. My own issue with Uber, or any of the networked marketplace platforms for that matter, has less to do with the comments made by executives at private dinners and more to do with the architecture of the platforms themselves. I've talked about this before. While the marketplaces are peer-to-peer, the platforms are highly centralized. These apps are fundamentally designed to violate your privacy. They require identity checks, they ask for all kinds of invasive permissions when you install them on your phone, they take your credit card details, and of course track all of your transactions on the platform, and all of this data ends up in a centralized database, ripe for the taking by malicious employees, hackers, and governments. In the case of Uber, the app is always following your GPS location and can tell where and when you are traveling. This is troubling to me. They even have categories for customers that take rides at certain times of the day, such as the infamous glory riders who leave one location late at night to go to a private residence, at least that's what they're inferring, and then get a ride back to the original location several hours later. The apparent fact that Uber's hiring practices clearly aren't meeting some standards of ethics and conduct has many people concerned about the security of their personal data, which I can confirm anecdotally based on how many people I've seen on Twitter who say they've uninstalled the app over privacy concerns. These concerns will only be eliminated when the platforms themselves are decentralized using software like OpenBazaar or MadeSafe, which we'll learn more about later on in this episode during the interview with Paige Peterson, a developer, evangelist, and community leader at MadeSafe. Until the platforms are decentralized, companies like Uber will wield increasing amounts of power due to their proprietary network effects, the same power that allows companies like Facebook to get away with systemic abuse of their users, even with over 1 billion people on their platform. When will people learn that centralization and hierarchy always leads to abuses of power? Whenever that will be, it can't come soon enough. For Let's Talk Bitcoin listeners, the magic word for today's episode is SafeNet. 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 You'll have 96 hours from the time this episode is posted to go over to letstalkbitcoin.com and create an account if you haven't already to redeem the magic word SafeNet for your share of this week's LTB coin proof of participation distribution. On the positive side of the news, Ripple Labs, developers of the Ripple protocol, recently held a successful demo event at their new office on Montgomery Street in San Francisco. Over 300 community members, developers, investors, entrepreneurs, and Ripple Labs employees showed up to see demos from developers and entrepreneurs who are building applications on top of the Ripple protocol. Ripple Labs developers Evan Schwartz and Stephen Thomas gave a back-to-back presentation on their new Codius platform, discussing smart contracts, cryptocurrencies, Codius as the ecosystem for smart programs, and the future of autonomous applications. Interestingly, the day after the event, the price of XRP was up over 50% to 3/4 of a cent, and has since continued trending upward to over a penny, briefly tripling in price to over 1.5 cents. As of right now, as I'm recording this, the price of XRP is sitting at just over a penny. Speculators, eat your heart out. I'd also like to share a couple cool open source peer-to-peer services that I recently discovered. One is called Talks, which uses technology similar to BitTorrent to enable peer-to-peer instant messaging and video and voice calling services. You can check out the software and find links to download one of the available clients on their website at talks.im. That's www.tox.im. I tried it out on my own computer and it seems to be working. If anyone that you know is using it, or if you get any of your friends or family to use it, you'll be able to connect with them and chat peer-to-peer. Another cool website I found is called reap.io. That's REEP.io, which allows you to send files of unlimited size to other people using peer-to-peer WebRTC technology directly in the browser. No special software needed, just an up-to-date browser like Firefox or Chromium. It seems that with every passing day, the iron grip of the copyright cartels gets weaker and weaker, as even resilient torrent websites like the Pirate Bay become less relevant. Stick around to learn about another peer-to-peer technology that could be the final nail in the coffin of the copyright cartels. I would like to welcome to episode 6 of the P2P Connects Us podcast, Paige Peterson of Project Safe and the San Francisco Bitcoin Meetup. Welcome to the show, Paige.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So this is the first in-person discussion I've ever had, so this is going to be interesting. I'm actually going to change this up on you. Usually the first question I've been asking people is, how did you get interested in peer-to-peer? I'm actually changing it just now, just for you. So
cool. Lay it on me.
What does peer-to-peer mean to you?
Peer-to-peer. It means no centralized aspect, completely distributed system. I guess these are just words coming to the top of my head. Reducing middlemen to providing actual value and giving power to the individuals, the peers.
Cool. That's a great answer, because I think it's important to distinguish the fact that in a true peer-to-peer network, middlemen become peers themselves. They don't have any privileges that anybody else has. They're just a peer that has earned some sort of role within the network as maybe like a connector of other peers. And anyone within the network can take on that role, and some people will just be better than other people. And this is really relevant to what we're going to be talking about today, which is the MadeSafe network. First off, what is MadeSafe, and how did the idea for Project Safe come into being?
So MadeSafe is an attempt to remove servers. You'll still be able to use the hardware that exists with servers in the MadeSafe network, but you're not depending on them like we do with the internet today. So if you're accessing a website or, uploading files to Dropbox, all of that is going through a single server Maybe if you're lucky, they're using redundant servers to back up your data and whatnot. But it is, in the end, still extremely centralized. And the idea is to remove the possibility that if your files are being saved, are existing in the quote-unquote cloud, they're still safe. So files will be distributed into chunks throughout the entire network, which will be made up of individuals allocating portions of their home computers or laptops or even smartphones to give to the network. Similar to projects like SETI at Home and Folding at Home, where people are contributing spare resources to the network. However, there's an incentive scheme / ecosystem built within the network based on cryptocurrency called SafeCoin.
Wow, so there's a lot of moving parts to this. So I guess the first question I have to ask is, so right now you have to trust Google or Facebook or Dropbox or any of these cloud hosting providers with your data. They can typically see what data you're putting on their servers and delete it or remove access, or they can do anything they want with this data. It's basically like shared data at that point, even though in their terms of service they might say that they don't do anything with the data. So you're trusting another person with your data. In this network, you're also trusting other people with your data to some degree, but instead of it being a well-known corporation where there's accountability, these are strangers all across the internet. Why should people trust strangers on the internet to store their data with MadeSafe?
Strangers who are storing your data don't have any chance of seeing your data at all, so all these chunks are encrypted, and the network itself is essentially a complex system in that the vaults, the nodes in the network, also perform checks on each other and kind of manage each other in groups. So if a node is doing something fishy that the network isn't normally used to seeing, it will kind of derank that node, and the node will be less used. Like, there won't be chunks being stored on that vault. So the whole complexity of the system is kind of what prevents individuals from being able to compromise data or even see data or delete data. If a node is malicious and figures out how to delete chunks that it's storing, A, it won't earn SafeCoin for storing those chunks, and B, the network will see that malicious behavior, derank the node, and additionally save those chunks of data elsewhere. There really just isn't a reason to be a bad actor within this network. There's obviously always going to be bad actors, but in the end, in terms of like ecosystem and, you know, even society, it's really all about mitigating and making it more beneficial just to be good, rather than trying to eliminate the possibility of everyone being, like, anyone being bad, because that's just never going to happen. It's about creating the incentive to act in a fair way.
That's really interesting. So this is like a man-made, complex, adaptive system that's basically designed for resilience then. It's not designed for like perfect security. It's designed for resilience against bad actors, to make an anti-fragile network in the same way that some other peer-to-peer networks like BitTorrent or Bitcoin have been created, where I don't know if this is exactly the case with MadeSafe, but the more people try to attack the network, the more it might become stronger as a result, because the developers are able to optimize for the new kinds of attacks, and at the same time, people who are using the network, they might experience some performance deficiencies during an attack, but their data is still safe, right? Like you mentioned, I guess the way it works is when you put a file into the network or some data into the network, it's first encrypted locally on your computer, and then you chop it up and then spread it out over the network, and you'll have like a dozen files or a dozen copies or something like that, it automatically balances, right?
There's a minimum of 4 copies.
Minimum of 4, okay.
Yeah, and I think we'll also figure out the threshold between that. We're still in testing mode, so a lot of what we're doing right now is figuring out just optimizing the whole network and making the, because you don't want to be too redundant, because then that's kind of is more costly to the network as a whole. But you also don't want to be not redundant enough to compromise these data chunks. But just to correct something, the data itself is actually chopped up into chunks first and then encrypted through a process called self-encryption. It was created specifically for this network, but essentially there's actually videos about it on the MadeSafe YouTube that I recommend people looking into because they're very visual and good at explaining how the network works. But essentially, self-encryption is each of the chunk. Say there's 3 chunks that of a file that are being distributed out. Each chunk is encrypted by the other chunks in the network. So say chunk 1 needs to be encrypted. It's encrypted with the hash of chunk 2, and chunk 2 is encrypted with the hash of chunk 3, and then chunk 3 is encrypted with the hash of chunk 1. So if you are trying to get access to someone's data, you're not only going to need their authentication keys, you're also going to need to know information about the data itself. So it's providing this kind of extra level of security, which a lot of people have actually recommended is too much security. David has mentioned that a few people have come in and been like, whoa, this is like too much encryption. Like, this is not necessary. But, it's, better safe than sorry, right? We use this process called exclusive OR for encryption and also RSA. There is a lot of completely newly built aspects of this network that have never existed before. Something else that's really exciting is this is going to be the first time any individuals will be able to log into a system without putting their passwords into the system, without any password getting passed into the network. All of the keys are going to be kept locally client side. And essentially how that works is if you're logging in, say you're logging into the network, you basically get an encrypted packet gets sent to you by data managers, which are nodes in the network. Your job is to decrypt that packet, re-encrypt it with your keys, send it back into the network, the nodes verify it, and that's how you get access to the network. Your keys are always staying on your local client side, and that has never happened before on the internet.
How do people actually get their files back out of the network? Is it kind of like BitTorrent, where they have a list of hashes that are on a website, like a torrent website, or that they keep locally in a folder somewhere? Can they access their stuff from any computer, or do they have to have this file list locally or something?
Yeah, the file lists are all kept by other nodes. So that's one of we call them personas. So there's different personas that nodes can take on. It's almost like in an ant colony, ants have different specialized roles.
Yeah, I've seen you guys use ants a lot.
Yeah, ants are kind of, ant colonies are really what the network is based off of. There's so much correlation. So essentially each node is storing chunks of data, but it's also playing a specific specialized role in terms of managing and checking other vaults. And these specialized roles are adaptable, so the network will determine what a node needs to be. Like, say, someone turns off a bunch of, verification persona nodes get turned off, so it will reallocate and redistribute where it needs to go. But specifically...
So there's some intelligence in the network, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Not like artificial intelligence, but it's like I said, it's a complex adaptive system.
Exactly.
It adapts to the state of the network.
Right.
And it's also efficient because you have some redundancy, but not 100% redundancy. You don't have everybody doing the same thing. Like in Bitcoin, like all of the miners are working on the same thing. Right. Whereas in this network, it sounds like you have some people that have some roles, like the data managers, other people that are the farmers, other people, they're transaction managers for the safe coin.
And that's really one of the key things, is what makes the security so high, is that, say you're a malicious node and you want to screw something up. Say you are a node that's they're keeping the maps of where the data chunks are for someone's data.
Mm-hmm.
You're only knowledgeable about that specific thing. You're still needing to communicate with other nodes that are acting as different data management personas. There isn't one node that has enough power to harm the network.
Mm-hmm. If a particular actor had a lot of computers and they could simultaneously fill a lot of roles, would they be able to reconstruct anything that would be damaging to the network or the user in terms of either hurting privacy or damaging the security at all?
There's always potential. It's about probability, honestly. Another aspect is that you can't determine what persona your node is. You can't say, oh, I want to be this persona. The network...
It's deterministic?
Yeah, the network chooses which nodes are doing what based on what the network needs. And the important part about the exclusive OR encryption is that it's based off of this idea of closeness, which isn't Euclidean closeness. David actually wrote a really great article about it on his blog, metaquestions.me, and there's also actually a really great explanation of it. There's the Montreal Safe Pod. They're doing a series of videos to kind of try to explain the network. Eric, who's giving the presentation, talked about XOR and how it kind of works, and it's really great to kind of see the mapping. The distance between two nodes in an XOR-based network can only happen once, and that's called perfect secrecy, I believe. The concept where if you give one distance to the network from one vault, it's always going to end up on the same vault, the same pair. There's never going to be another pair that has that same distance.
The network at a low level is, as you mentioned earlier, they're incorporating a lot of concepts that have never really been done in an active network like this before. Like these concepts have had use cases in different contexts, but putting them together in such a way to make it this autonomous internet is something that hasn't been done. So for the people who are interested in the really low-level technical details, David Irvine's blog, MetaQuestions, is a great place to go, and some of the videos that are on the MadeSafe YouTube and the Montreal Safe Pod YouTube channel would be great to look at. But coming back to kind of a higher level discussion, what kind of effect do you see this kind of technology having on the progression of the internet in like 5 years? In the context of a world where for the past year and a half now, it's been within mainstream consciousness that not only are governments spying on their own citizens' communication data and metadata, but a lot of the commercial companies that people have been trusting with this data are the ones who are complicit in just handing it all over. How do you think that this world that we live in is going to react to and adopt this technology?
5 years is kind of it's a little difficult. I have a feeling it might be slower to develop at the beginning just because people will be getting used to it, and there's not going to be like large corporations jumping on it and building these services that are available immediately. That said, that's good because it's giving individuals and individual developers the opportunity to kind of take the lead in this new internet and creating services that are actually providing value rather than trying to maximize capital and make shareholders happy and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So I think the ecosystem that is going to exist within the Safe network will drive a lot of the development and a lot of the usage. The SafeCoin token and the ways that content creators and content consumers will be able to interact directly, or if not directly, use services that are providing actual value like content aggregation and whatnot. I think all of that, it's going to make the internet ecosystem extremely horizontally structured, and the power dynamics in 5 years, I think, will be extremely different than what we see today with Google. I don't even know what Google is going to do. I don't know. I mean, I hope that, because there are people working at Google that want to do good and want to create good things, like, do no evil. Those people are still there, but they're just being like controlled by the admin bureaucracy type people.
Yeah.
Hopefully those people will leave Google and make their own Google, but
they can use
Project Safe.
Google. They can use their 20% day to obsolete Google.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it sounds like a pretty distributed future. Looking like, as you're talking about the power dynamics, it's just distributing the power more evenly in the network, and pushing the intelligence back towards the edges of the network, and not aggregated in these huge central hubs in the network.
And also testing and pushing this idea of intellectual property, and enabling artists and content creators to not rely on Apple Store or iTunes Store or whatnot, to get their music out, or their whatever. Content creators include artists, researchers, journalists. All of these people will have the ability to earn income directly from consumers, similar to what people are trying to push with Bitcoin and micropayments on the internet today, but it's going to be built in from the bottom, and all transactions are going to be instant, and micropayments are going to be very, very efficient, whereas Bitcoin, it's a little bit more difficult with the scaling stuff that's happening now.
So taking out some of the gatekeepers, or all of the gatekeepers really, and making it more like almost completely eliminating the barriers to entry for people who want to push content out to the public internet. It sounds really democratizing, even more than the internet has been so far. So this sounds really exciting. I know MadeSafe just released the testnet 2 version of the Safe network. Maybe for the last couple minutes that we have here, talk a little bit about where the project is at right now, what's coming up next that people could be excited about, and of course, where could people go to learn more about everything that's happening within the Project Safe.
Testnet 2 was released about a month ago, I'd say, at this point. We are currently focusing on building applications are building example applications and the API for other developers to use. We definitely are focusing on developers right now because, when there's a new internet, we need apps to run on top of it, and MadeSafe can't build all of those apps. We need other developers to do that. We're working on example applications and the API. Testnet 3, I don't think there's a specific date for that yet, but that will include the addition of Test SafeCoin. And once there's example apps running, people will be able to use the test network to test their applications or test storing data or whatnot, test moving SafeCoin around. Once that's over and once we're comfortable with that, we'll be launching. Launch is early next year. There's no specific date for that set. However, we actually just included in our website at madesafe.net a roadmap. It's kind of a high-level roadmap for people to kind of keep track of all the different things that we're working on and things that we've finished. So if you just go to madesafe.net/roadmap, you'll be able to see that. So in terms of getting involved, if you're a developer, get involved right now. If you go to madesafe.org, which is our community, it's kind of a community for everyone. Not everyone there is a developer. See what other people are talking about, and if you have a specific idea, post your idea and get feedback on the forum. And this is a new internet. We need applications. We need every application that exists on the internet to exist on the Safe network. So we need a browser. We need multiple browsers. We need VoIP messaging. everything.
Cat picture sharing.
Cat picture sharing. Yeah, everything that
That's like the first thing that you gotta have. Otherwise, no one else will want to use it.
Yeah.
You gotta get the cats on there. Okay, awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show, Paige. Madesafe.org for the community. Madesafe.net if you want to learn more about the technology. And of course, you can follow the project MadeSafe on Twitter at iopt.io if you want to follow Paige. That's pretty much it. Thanks a lot for coming on the show and telling us all about the future of the peer-to-peer internet.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for tuning in to episode 6 of the P2P Connects Us podcast. If you have any comments or questions, you can reach me through the contact page on my website at p2pconnects.us. Till next time.